Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this, the latest in the IUA's Future of Ireland events. My name is Paul Johnston, and I'm very privileged to be the Director General of the Irish Universities Association, the voice of Ireland's 7 research-intensive universities. As you'll see from the banner behind me, the focus today is very much on Europe, the upcoming presidency of the European Union of Ireland, the Inspire programme and the connection between the two. How can we strengthen Ireland's position in the context of the future of European research, infrastructure and innovation? And we're delighted to have a star-studded cast. I'll let you decide as the morning goes on who are the stars and who are the studs. Have an online poll at the end. But anyway, I just wanted to grab a couple of minutes of your time slightly cheekily to say that today we are launching online the new IUA strategy for the next 5 years. And just to say a word about it, we've tried to keep it deliberately a very short and focused document. There's a lot that you could say about, and you'll know this better than me. I'm a recovering diplomat, having been the British ambassador here for 5 years and done various other British diplomatic roles for over 25 years in a range of countries. But there's a lot you could say about the importance of a university, but that would be really preaching to the choir in front of this audience. But I think we in the IUA, with the supporting and working closely with the 7 presidents of the IUA University, and I'll be handing over shortly to my friend and even more important, my boss, John O'Halloran from UCC, we see our role at this critical period for the university sector and for Ireland and for the EU as being really threefold. One, to be a voice of the sector, not the voice of the sector, because all the universities have their own distinctive voices, but to try and talk on behalf of the sector in the public space and in the private space as well. I'm going to see the Public Expenditure Minister today, so that will be a good test of how effective a voice I can be. Second, to be an interlocutor, to be working with business, with civil society, with politicians and with others, again, to make the case and to strengthen the case for universities. And thirdly, within the sector, in all the IUA working groups and standing groups that support the IUA Council, to be a convener, a challenger at times, a thought leader, to look at the whole range of issues that universities need to lean into and face up to over the next period. And so in our strategy document, we've gone for 5 A's to sort of focus on what we want to do. The first, and I think the most central, is advocacy. We need to be out there every day, every week, arguing for universities for the support that you need to do your brilliant work, whether that's financial support, regulatory support, other forms of infrastructure. The government has committed and is being generous in terms of the money it is giving, but we'd obviously like more, and we'd like more quickly, a point I'll be making to the Public Expenditure Minister this afternoon. So the first A is advocacy. The second A is alignment, the importance of working with others. I've focused on people like IBEC, on ISBE, the small and medium-sized enterprise organisation, trade unions, civil society, students' unions, getting a range of voices so that we can work out how best to make our arguments together. And of course, international alignment as well, not least on the eve of the presidency. Thirdly, agility. You'll all be aware that the world is changing at tremendous pace. I was fortunate enough yesterday to go to the latest of the Minister's Skills Roundtables, which was on AI, both, if you like, AI skills and what we call skills around AI, the sort of things that you'll need, that we'll all need to be able to be sure that AI is our servant and not our master. So some of the key transversal skills that the Minister and all of us think are really important to develop. So how do we, as universities, lean into a world of embracing AI, working out what it means for how we teach and what we teach, what lifelong learning means, what a huge range of challenges mean, and how universities can continue to be agile, adaptable and supportive of the society that we're here to serve. Fourthly, access. How do we continue to combine academic excellence, but also being real motors of social mobility? So schemes like HARE and DEAR, so I always get that wrong, anyway, HERE and DARE, but mobility for people with physical disadvantages, other issues. How can we make sure that university serves them, supports them through their university journey and prepares them for the life beyond? And the final A is accountability, which in a world where value for money is increasingly rightly focused, how do we demonstrate best-in-class governance? How do we demonstrate the sort of modern management that will enable us to do the change management and the adaptation that as institutions in the sector we need to do while obviously remaining faithful to the values that have animated universities for hundreds of years and which remain as important today, perhaps more important today in the world of misinformation, disinformation, polarisation and populism. The key values of a university, I think, are eternal, but the context in which we develop and inculcate and expound them will need to continually adapt. So an interesting and I think an inspiring set of challenges. And having world-class research infrastructure, having world-class research across the full span of subjects done in an ever more strategic but yet individually inspiring way is obviously key to how Ireland will move forward, how we will make that meta journey from a country at the moment perhaps dangerously dependent on a few sources of foreign direct investment towards one which has much more of an indigenous research innovation ecosystem with a strong enterprise heart at it, which also means a really strong applied and fundamental research base across the country. And the upcoming EU presidency, not least because of the big decisions that we hope to take on the budget and the framework, will be a big part of that. So to set the scene for today, I encourage you to go on the IUA website where you can find both our strategy and perhaps at least as important our pre-budget submission with all our arguments for strong support of the sector. But to introduce today's discussion and to give the first of our keynote speeches, very pleased to welcome all the way from Cork, the President of University College Cork and this year's Chairman of the IUA, Professor John O'Halloran. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I just said to Paul, I think it's almost a year to the day since we did your interview. I think, Paul, and I hope you don't mind me saying, I think it's the only time I was doing interviews where there's security details outside the door, because you were still ambassador at the time. So colleagues, good morning. It's a huge privilege to be here. I'd also like to apologise that the Minister isn't here. I know he's represented today by William Bozang. The Minister is committed today, and it's just really important that we have a very strong Minister and a Taoiseach who really support the work that all of us are doing every day. So I'm really pleased to be here on behalf of the Irish University Association to be with you this morning. Cork isn't that far, actually. It's only down the road. We get up here pretty, you can get a day's work done on the way up. I want to particularly welcome William. I'm trying to see William. Oh, he's here. William Bozang, Assistant Secretary of the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. William, thank you. Thank you for everything you do every day, because there are always competing demands in government. And we really appreciate the effort and time and talent that's going into this every day. Our distinguished panel members and colleagues from across higher education, research and innovation system, and particularly welcome Diarmuid O'Brien from Research Ireland. We had the privilege of having Diarmuid address our university governing authority this week, and we had a great positive, incredibly positive feedback and support for all that Research Ireland is doing. It's great to have all of you here this morning. Today's discussion takes place at a particularly important time, I think, for all of us for research and innovation. Research is one of our greatest assets, one of our greatest natural assets in this country. For over the past quarter of a century, Ireland has transformed its research landscape through sustained investment, strategic vision, and a whole range of funding from national, European and philanthropy, and the commitment of countless researchers, students, academics, technical specialists, professional staff. We've built a research system that is internationally respected. I'm a great believer in everybody's role in the education and research ecosystem role, and I genuinely say that from the person at the gate that opens the gate to secure the equipment, to manage the equipment, to make sure it's safe. One of the real privileges of being a president of university is you get a chance to graduate and be at graduation ceremonies. I graduate 7,500 students every year, and I'm always struck by a comment that I asked student parents one day, is why did the students choose UCC? And it could be no different, it could be any other institution. And she said, you know, we came to the open day and it was really good. We met some really good researchers, incredible faculty, incredible equipment, inspired by what was going on. But it was the kindness of the security staff that made their decision. So the ecosystem we are creating is about everybody, actually, whatever role you are. And I want to just acknowledge all of those individuals, collectively and individually, who every day enable us to do extraordinary things in our universities. That achievement should not be underestimated in what we've achieved in the last 25 years. Research has become one of Ireland's great national strengths, and it contributes to our democracy, to our economy, our public services, our health system, our culture, our environment, and our ability to respond to complex societal challenges. It attracts investment, strengthens enterprise, informs policy, and enhances Ireland's standing internationally. Over the last, many of us have been traveling to the United States. Last night I was sitting next to someone from the University of Texas who are being absolutely gutted in terms of their curriculum, in terms of their research. So we're in a very good place, actually, with support from government and a very stable democracy as we embark on the European presidency. Perhaps most importantly, though, research expands the boundaries of human knowledge. At its core, research is an act of optimism and, I believe, confidence. It is driven by the belief that we can better understand the world around us through understanding and improve the lives of people and communities. In an era characterized by rapid technological changes, and Paul referenced AI just a few moments ago, geopolitical uncertainty, climate pressures, demographic shifts, political shifts almost on a daily basis, profound societal transformation, and the capacity to generate new knowledge has never been more important. But at the core of this is our people. Research is not a luxury. It is critical infrastructure of a modern nation, and I believe we are going on a really great journey today. Universities, I'm really proud to say, together, whatever that status is, whether it's the TU or ourselves, universities sit at the heart of that endeavour. Universities don't simply educate students. We create knowledge, we develop talent, we challenge assumptions, we provide intellectual foundations that underpin innovation, creativity and societal progress. Every year our universities educate thousands of students who go on to become wonderful citizens, teachers, doctors, engineers, scientists, entrepreneurs, public servants, artists, community leaders. Interestingly, our recent assessment of career destinations for some of our graduates, pre-graduation, 25% of them are now expressing an interest in public service and in the EU. That's a significant shift, because people will now see the importance of that democracy and how we can support it. Engineers, entrepreneurs, and at the same time our researchers are helping to address some of the most pressing challenges facing Ireland and indeed the wider world. And I think we've got to see ourselves also as a global actor. Yes, we'll solve problems for Ireland, but we have to be a global actor also. And in my world, research and education are absolutely inseparable. The quality of our teaching is hugely strengthened by discovery. We want our students to be inspired and taught by world-lead class researchers. That's what distinguishes all of us from the kind of ecosystem that exists in other parts of the world. And I say that from personal experience. I worked in a liberal arts college in Colby College, University of Maine. You weren't in Colby? Well, yeah, there you are, right? So, and Colby doesn't have a research-intensive program. They're superb faculty there, but they're faculty that have come from somewhere else. And I think what I would say, having experienced that, you can really see the difference that happens in a research-intensive organisation. So that is one of the defining characteristics of what we do every day, one of the reasons why investment in research matters so profoundly. And I believe we're at a moment, a once-in-a-generation opportunity, with great support from government. I can tell you, as someone who spent some time with the Taoiseach, who introduced PRTLI, you will know, so a real advocate for higher education, for the formation of the department. We've got Taoiseach, who was a previous Minister for Further and Higher Education, and we've now got a minister who is absolutely energetic and committed to higher education and research. So I think this is our moment. Let's not grab failure from the jaws of success. So let's make the most of this as we move on to the future. And to me, Inspire is one of the most ambitious investments in research infrastructure ever seen undertaken by the state. It reflects confidence in our universities, confidence in our industry, confidence in innovation and research system, and the recognition that world-class research requires world-class foundations. Many of us in the room today, and I count myself amongst them, had the impact of PRTLI, whether it was PRTLI 1, 2, I'm looking at Eucharia. Eucharia, you were probably in the middle of all of that at the time. And I know as a researcher myself, it profoundly changed the way we conducted research. Some of the rules of engagement, that you collaborate with other institutions and outside your discipline, it really promoted interdisciplinarity. It caused a fundamental change, was possible for Irish research probably for the very first time. It created facilities, capabilities and opportunities that continue to benefit researchers right to this day. Students, institutions and society has enormously benefited from previous investment in PRTLI. It helped Ireland build a critical mass, develop international credibility and strengthen our position within the global research community. I believe Inspire presents an opportunity not only to do that, but even do more. Indeed, it presents the opportunity to build upon those foundations and take further steps as a research nation. Of course, infrastructure is only part of the story. We speak about research infrastructure, and it's easy to think primarily about equipment, laboratories, facilities, buildings, and they are critical. But actually, our greatest asset is our people and how we support those people. including researchers who generate new knowledge, the doctoral candidates who represent the future, the technical specialists who operate increasingly sophisticated facilities, the data experts who enable modern research, and the professional staff who all around us and wrap around us to enable to make these partnerships of significant impact. And maybe the other piece we need to start thinking about is how we wrap around business engagement people to translate and transfer that knowledge back out into society. All I can only say for us that we find that we want the researchers to be the best researchers in the world, but we need to wrap some other supports around them to help them to spin out and do the translation work, that they can't simply do everything. And if we want to be truly world class, we've got to give the time and the space and the intellectual space for those colleagues to do that. So the infrastructure and talent are inseparable. The greatest return on investment comes from when we develop both together. That is why discussions about research infrastructure must also be discussions about researcher career, technical expertise, and probably, for me, really I'm passionate about is doctoral education. Investing in talent and doctoral education is critical. Doctoral researchers are not simply students, they are creators of new knowledge. I had the privilege of supervising 45 PhDs myself, so I'm speaking for someone who absolutely had an amazing time working with extraordinary people. They are future academic leaders, they're future business leaders, they're innovators, they're highly skilled professionals who contribute every aspect of society and indeed our economy. If Ireland is serious about strengthening research capacity, and I believe we are, then we must also be serious about strengthening our doctoral education, expanding opportunities for talented people to ensure research. Interestingly, you probably know that the amount of doctoral students is declining in the United States because the value proposition that's been presented to them, but also the culture that's been created there. So this may be an opportunity for us to get further talent into our system. The conversation about infrastructure is ultimately a conversation about national capability and, I believe, resilience. It is about ensuring that Ireland has the talent, expertise, facilities and partnerships required to thrive in an increasing competitive and knowledge-intensive world. Today, as we embark on the eve of the European Presidency, and I'm proud to say that the College of Commissioners will be on our campus for 3 days. It'll call me all sorts of headaches, but it'll be fantastic to see some of the world leaders and supporting what we want to try and do as a nation. The Presidency of the Council of Europe, I believe, is actually really significant timing for all of us. As the multi-annual budget is struck, as we look at the ratios of research, as we look at the defence budgets, and we've got to keep an eye on both of those. Ireland's success in research has always been linked to international engagement. Our researchers collaborate globally. Our institutions participate actively in EU programmes and infrastructure. Our research system benefits enormously from being part of a European and indeed international ecosystem, which includes philanthropy. We look to the future and question it's not whether Ireland in Europe, not whether Ireland participates in European research. We do, and we do so successfully, and we want to lead that. The question is, how do we maximise our participation? How do we ensure that national investments such as Inspire, strengthen Ireland's voice, influence the impact in the European research landscape? How do we position Ireland not simply as a participant, but a trusted partner, a trusted collaborator, contributor, and a leader? How do we ensure that investments made today deliver on the benefits, not only for individual institutions, but actually the whole ecosystem, and collecting, working together, and the country as a whole? So I'm looking ahead with huge optimism. But these are the questions that will shape today's discussion. I'm delighted we have experienced people here today, a panel to explore these issues, to help us think about how Ireland can maximise the opportunities. I believe it is ready for us to do so. The scale of the opportunity, I believe, is absolutely considerable. We and all of us must remain ambitious. We must collaborate. We must be strategic. And I believe that Inspire can help strengthen Ireland's research capacity, deepen our engagement with Europe, support enterprise innovation, society, humanities, attract global talent, enhance our ability, and address challenges and opportunities of the decades ahead. This future is worth building together. And there's a great old adage, as you probably all have heard, that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. I believe we want to go far with our research. I believe we can have a very significant impact. So let's do it together and have impact. Go míle maith agaibh, and thank you very much. So, as I mentioned at the outset, unfortunately, Minister Lawless can't be with us today. He's representing on Taoiseach internationally, but we're hugely grateful to William Bozang, who will deliver his speech today. And William is known to all of us as the Assistant Secretary in the Department of the Affairs. William, thank you so much for stepping in. Go míle maith agaibh.
Morning, everyone. Delighted to be here this morning, and just picking up on the theme that John mentioned, sort of maximising the opportunity is really what we're about. And I think just getting people together, the system together, talk more about the system, people with an expertise about how we use the Inspire programme to drive the type of change, the type of transformation that PRTLI achieved. So I bring the Minister's apologies. As John mentioned, he's representing the Taoiseach at in Gdansk at the Ukraine Recovery Conference, and he's very disappointed to meet the event because Inspire, and Paul mentioned the advocacy role, but I mean, to be clear, the Minister, reflecting his prior engagement with the system before he came into the job, knew through IUA advocacy and indeed from technological universities that infrastructure was a key issue. So that's certainly, coming back to your 5 A's, and I'm of a generation that 5 A's was a very good leaving cert. So, that was a really good example of where IUA advocacy has helped shape policy in an evidence-informed way, and that was another benefit of that whole process, that we went out and we gathered the analysis. And Paul, waking up in the morning, facing a meeting with DPER, I like my colleagues in the Department of Public Expenditure Reform, but they're very demanding in terms of evidence. And this was a situation with our colleagues in the department. We were able to go in and make the case with the Minister for that investment. So very much welcome the strategy, Paul, and the commitment to a more strategic, coordinated and future-focused approach is very much in line with the department's own thinking. The presidency of the taking up of the presidency role has been mentioned already, and it's like a very, it's very timely to have the conference here this morning. Coreper agreed FP10 yesterday, so that's a real achievement of the Cyprus presidency. But it really highlights, and having been kind of, not intimately involved in the negotiations, but certainly close to them, that environment is changing, and that's why the theme of this conference is very important. It's about connecting into Europe more, and of course that happens to a huge extent already, but we have to deepen and intensify our strategic engagement with the EU through the new framework programme, through the connection with the ECF, with a particular focus on research infrastructures. Because sitting in the department, and I'd be very interested to hear perspectives from people here today, it's an opportunity that we haven't fully realised. Now, there's always constraints, there's funding constraints, there's time constraints, but Inspire is the opportunity to make the difference. So this, I don't intend just to give a progress report on Inspire. It's about how our research and innovation system positions itself in and for Europe. And why, and I mean, this is a team that's strong in the department and very strong with the Minister. Why the research and innovation system sector needs to perform as a system going forward, not just a collection of parts. And the word system is at the heart of it. To succeed in the European stage, and you see this at European level, you have to come to Europe as a coherent whole. And that's not an end in itself, and it's not a sort of bureaucratic nicety, but it's seeing that system as being able to project itself nationally and internationally as a social economic enabler whose strength comes from the diversity of the system. It's not a call for uniformity or homogeneity. So that's the vision behind Inspire. This programme obviously funds research equipment in higher education, but its purpose is national, to advance our competitiveness, our innovation and our productivity. So national and European research policy must now be read through or looked at through the same lens, and that's the competitiveness challenge. And we've heard about it numerous times, but it's worth kind of returning to it this morning. And that's the competitiveness challenge for Europe and also for Ireland, set out so starkly by Mario Draghi. And his report, his diagnosis of Europe's widening innovation gap, is not an abstract problem beyond these shores. It goes to the heart of the sustainability of our economic model. It's a real challenge facing what we are, a small, globally open, innovation-driven economy whose productivity depends on operating on the frontier. And it's research and then it's translation and innovation that gets us and keeps us at that frontier. But it's an important point to make, because it's sometimes characterized as sort of, purely a kind of an economic lens. I mean, the Draghi case is at root a social one. Competitiveness is how Europe sustains its societies and the prosperity of its citizens. And I mean, the recent visit to the ERC and, what we were hearing from the chair really it didn't remind us, but it confirmed for us that discovery research across the sciences, the arts, humanities, and social science that creates knowledge before you get to the point of trying to value or create value from that knowledge. And it's the bedrock to the cohesive, healthy, democratic society which if you don't have an innovative economy, and it can't endure. So a research system that funds only what can show a near-term return will in turn have less to invent and less wealth to create. So Future of Europe, Future of Ireland, it's rooted, it's anchored in its ideas and its people. And it's interesting then to reflect on how Inspire can contribute to that. But I'll talk a little bit about how we got here and a few milestones. I mean, obviously a lot of discussion since the establishment of the department on the Taoiseach's initiative. It recognised the integral relationship between skills, research and innovation. There had been work we'd carried out in the department because when I came into the department in 2018, I remember the Deputy Secretary at the time saying to me that, having brought me through all the issues that were playing out in higher education, further education, if you have any questions about research, ask Tim. And Tim, as some of you will remember him, Tim Cullinan, was the single resource that the department had looking at research issues. Now, of course, DETI at the time, or Debbie as it might have been, it had that responsibility for national research and innovation policy. And that's what they did and what they did over that time was obviously important, but it is a different lens. And bringing that responsibility in under the new department, or we're not so much new, was a really crucial step, I think, in providing the basis for the progress that we've been able to make subsequently. But coming back to the HERG, because we convened the HERG to kind of try to develop a distinct higher education view of the challenge for higher education research. And one or two people that were involved are here this morning. Some people that were involved have got very eminent subsequently. I was eminent at the time. So, but I mean, what the message, two key messages really, that if we undervalue the impact of the research because we do not capture it systematically, and that we should hold in balance the protecting space for investigator-driven, curiosity-led research while also developing a more directed, mission-orientated strand with neither at the expense of the other. And that would be a really core, it's what you've already said, John, this morning, but it's also a core theme, a core tenet of the legislation of the Research Ireland strategy. So as we see it, the balance of thematic priority and bottom-up discovery as complements rather competitors is precisely the question that Europe is now wrestling with. And the pathway that HERG established then really runs forward since then, since 2018, through the establishment of DFERIS, Impact 2030, the establishment of Research Ireland, the outcome of the NDP review, and now Inspire. So Inspire is a landmark investment in Ireland's talent and innovation ambitions. And like the PRTLI, the HEI, the higher education institutions, are at the heart of it. And that's a very deliberate choice, because it is, as already been said, and as you know, it is in our universities and institutes that discovery research, advanced training and knowledge transfer connect. It sounds as if I'm reading your speech now, John. And like the PRTLI, the programme is open to all disciplines. And that's not that's not lip service, but a statement of intent that Ireland's research system draws its strength from the full breadth of its intellectual life, and the Inspire is built to reflect and reinforce that breadth. And I should say, I mean, there's been absolutely great work done, close collaboration, close partnership between the HEA and Research Ireland moving to deliver Inspire. It's one thing conceiving an approach, but as you'll all know, actually moving that into reality is hard work and heavy lifting, and both organisations work tirelessly to do that. So Inspire, like PRTLI, is meant to do something structural. And like when you come to this, and I'm not absolutely steeped, obviously, in the research system, and then people ask you about Inspire and say, Inspire, what is equipment and its kit? And then people, so like there is a communication challenge, I think, for us that we need to work hard on, and I'm sure Paul will be bringing it to Minister Chambers later. This is a structural change. And in designing it, we heard repeatedly about the fragmentation that set in after PRTL ended, which was a real cost because, again, as you know, as you see, capability once built decays when it's not sustained and connected. So Inspire exists to reverse that, but it doesn't stand alone, and that's part of that system-level approach that we're talking about. It's the anchor of wider national constellations, our plans for high-performance computing and the AI infrastructure, the work underway to really deal with a very critical priority for our research and innovation system, the data infrastructure that we need. And then, of course, connecting to the new RIN network announced very recently, spanning all those critical technologies that will be crucial to the performance of the economy and to the research system more generally. But the point is that the equipment, compute, data and centres, and as John has already said, talent, they're not separate programs, they're one system, and Inspire is intended to be its anchor. So it's now really collectively incumbent on us to respond strategically as a whole system to the performance that's required nationally and internationally that Inspire gives us the basis to do. And I mean, I think I talked earlier about the impact issue, and I think as we look at it, and it's very much reflected in Inspire, there's sort of 5 lines of impact that run from its inception to its return, which are working through to inform, to give the department's perspective, the system, the public service, our perspective, and then feed into the discussion later. So, as already been said, equip matters only if our talent pipeline is strengthened alongside it. And as has been said, our doctoral system is strong and it's attractive internationally. It's a real strategic asset at a moment that many of the world's best researchers are looking beyond their traditional homes. And access to world-class infrastructure can be a real attractor in competing for those people, and I think I have seen that through the Global Talent Initiative. But I mean, in the department, and then again reflecting the engagement with the IUA and TIA, we've seen the need to look at the whole issue of doctoral education, because fundamentally it is an issue of talent, it is an issue of skills, it is an issue of ensuring that we have the research workforce, both for the economy and for academia, for research, that will endure and deliver. So at the moment, and she's here this morning, Mary Liz Trant is scoping out how we develop new models to deliver that workforce, complementing, not absolutely, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's complementing existing models with newer ones, such as industrial PhDs. When you look at the RI strategy, you see the work they've done to identify PhD requirements in industry on account of what kind of projections EI and IDA are making. We need to grow our PhD workforce, but we need to do it in a way that's boxing clever, that's smart, and is building the bridges between the research system and enterprise. The second aspect of impact then from Inspire is research performance and data. So data capacity, as you know, underpins every research infrastructure. We're seeking to build a national data infrastructure, national research and innovation data infrastructure. We're moving through to participate in the European Open Science Cloud Federation, keeping Irish research linked and connected to European data and ensuring our investment in computing earns its full return. And that has a whole set of implications at institutional level, in terms of stewardship, repositories and fair compliance. Third aspect of impact then from Inspire clearly needs to be industry collaboration. Infrastructure funded under Inspire must be accessible to external users, particularly in industry. And a central equipment portal, as is planned, will show every user what's available, where and at what costs. It's a priority action in the Action Plan for Competitiveness and Productivity for that reason. And it also connects, and I think it will help underpin our engagement with the European Innovation Act, which is kind of looking at what Europe needs to do, which in some measure and significant measure is what we're already trying to do here. Fourth aspect then is the value creation, commercialisation, and it's seeing Inspire as supporting development of intellectual property across the sector, and its transfer and its translation into existing firms or new deep tech spin-outs, critical to our knowledge economy, and indeed the value for money case from the investment. Again, sort of leaning into what we expect to see in the EU's Innovation Act. Fifth strand, and one which is sort of central to our discussion this morning, is our engagement with Europe. So there's a continuum of infrastructure from local to shared to European research facilities. So the phase 1 expressions of interest asks how applicants will leverage international facilities for national benefit. And the whole question, as I mentioned earlier, membership of European infrastructures is meant to bring expertise home, anchored in Inspired. And I think we need to really focus on how we move forward in a systematic way to engage with that issue. But I mean, it's not a business as usual in Europe, as I mentioned earlier. Europe is redesigning its research and innovation architecture, the standalone framework programme tightly connected to the European Competitiveness Fund. It's the same question that we're facing. It's delicate. How to serve Europe's strategic top-down priorities while protecting excellent bottom-up, curiosity-driven research. Same issue that Herg identified, and it's really interesting to see how that process played out. There's a committee, the European Research Area Committee, sounds sort of bureaucratic, but it's where senior advisory bodies, there's the senior advisory body of national officials in the Commission that helps shape European research policy. That's a joint competence. So it's the member states' collective expert voice. So in Cyprus, as the discussions on FP10 and that kind of FP10 ECF nexus were at a very critical stage, Iraq sent a very clear signal on the priority-setting challenge at the heart of the negotiations. First of all, that priority setting must align with national research funding and priorities, and that member states must be active co-creators in the strategic agenda rather than any sense kind of disconnected or passive recipients of decisions taken elsewhere. And it's precisely the principle that we're engaging with here in Ireland, a national system consciously aligned with European priorities. With Inspire, our computing and data infrastructure that we're planning to build, things like the RIN network and the other elements that will flow from the RI strategy. Research security, I'll mention it because it went to government recently. It's going to be we're planning engagement with the sector to bring out the guidelines. It must be open to, so our engagement, as the phrase goes, must be open by default and secure by design. Openness and research security, they're not opposite. We're not looking to police the research system. Calibrated well, each will reinforce the other. Very interested in, and I'm sure there's expertise in the room on F3, the European Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructure. It's working on its 5-year roadmap, setting Europe's infrastructure priorities for the next 5 years. We need to use that moment to kind of, again, lean into that work to a greater extent. And focus on how the membership of European infrastructure is the most relevant to our strengths. So the connectivity that Inspire is built to deliver becomes real access, real expertise, and real return. So I'm going to talk just before I wrap up briefly about the presidency. I mean, I was sort of struck, I'm always struck actually by, some of you will recall Brian Farrell, and I'm sure if you do, you might have heard of his seminal book, Chairman or Chief. And when people talk about the presidency, sometimes there's the misapprehension that it's command and control, you take over, and it's not that at all. So it's chair rather than chief, an honest broker coalescing the views of all 27 member states. So from the 1st of July, our task will be to carry Council's position into negotiation with the European Parliament now that the PGA is agreed on FP10 and indeed on Erasmus Plus in the trialogues that turn proposals into law, and also to begin progressing the European Innovation Act. So you can't bring a national agenda to that table, but what we hope to bring, what we intend to bring, is the credibility of a country that has put its own house in order, a coherent national system anchored in Inspire and skilled to broker fair outcomes. That's how, and whether it's at Europe or whether it's at national level, or I'm sure in all the organisations you're in, that's how you earn your influence by, I have the line, not by leading from the front, but sometimes you have to do that. But at European level, it's not by leading from the front, but brokering well from the middle. So in conclusion, I know some of you here will be deep in your phase 1 applications, and obviously really looking forward to seeing seeing that come in and seeing how the kind of objectives we have for Inspire are being realised in practice. So I'll close where I'll begin. So Inspire's 5 impacts will run through the programme, and the objective is well beyond its lifetime. But the deeper thread is the one I started with, a research and innovation system that performs as a system anchored in our hard-won national strengths and consciously connected to what Europe is building. So we're taking over the presidency. We do so as a country that understands research and innovation, not as an end in itself, but as an enabler of our competitiveness, our prosperity, our social resilience, and our place in the Union. And that is where we want to bring and position Inspire, and where we want Inspire to bring Ireland in partnership with you and strategically anchored in Europe. Thanks very much.
So thank you very, very much, William. Thank you. Stay here. Don't run away. It's all good. So we're now going to move to our panel discussion, and we've got a fantastic panel for you here today. And I did also want to take the opportunity to say hi to the people who are joining us via the webinar. We will have an opportunity for some questions a bit later on. I'm looking at someone in the room. I'm hoping we might be able to take a question from a Q&A online as well. That would be great. So I'm going to ask our panelists to come forward and take their seats, and then I'll run through how this is going to work. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome. I'm going to say all the names at once. Anja Kepler, who's the Director of the Euro-Bioimaging Eric Biohub, Dr. Gemma O'Brien, the CEO of Research Ireland, Professor Carmel O'Sullivan, Dean of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences at Trinity College Dublin, and Professor Giampiero Cavalieri, Professor of Human Genetics at RCSI. Please come up. Make yourselves slightly precariously comfortable. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Well, what we just heard, I think, was a really rich description of the potential impacts of the Inspire programme, particularly in the wider European and international context in which that sits. So what I think it's a good place to start, what I wanted to do was to give our panellists, give William a chance to maybe catch his breath, give our panellists an opportunity just to tell us a little bit, maybe no more than kind of 4 or 5 minutes, on a kind of a position, a statement position in response to some of what you just heard from your perspective, and then what we'll do is I'll pick up a couple of questions, tackling issues that I know may be of interest in the room from pre-submitted questions. We'll tackle those, and then we'll open up to the floor. We've got a couple of roving mics, and we'll open up to the floor. I'm hoping to finish in about 50 minutes from now, just to give you a sense of how much time we have. If I look at my phone, please forgive me. I'm not checking my texts. I'm checking the time. Okay, should we just run from stage left to stage right, starting with you, Giampiero.
Thank you, Kate. So I would just like to start by thanking Minister Lawless and William for creating this opportunity. I think it's amazing for the research community, and it's a real chance to create a step change for research in Ireland. So I'm a data scientist by training. I work a lot in health research. I'm conscious there's many different disciplines here, but I'm just going to give a perspective from my particular area. And what resonated me with your words, William, and what we've heard this morning is, Ireland's research ecosystem reflects many of those around the world in that it's quite fragmented. And even in my own world of genetics, traditionally, the ability of your group depended on the data you generated yourself and had access to. That's changed dramatically in the last 10 or 15 years. Now it's very much about what data you have access through via the infrastructure that's available in your region. And I think that's where I see Inspire is the possibility of creating that step change for data sets in Ireland, in particular in my own area of genomics. And Pillar 2 and 3 in particular provide that opportunity, because you can think of the balance between bottom up, which is how we traditionally work in Ireland. We get funding from Research Ireland, from the HRB, to do our own work. So I view that as bottom up. I view Pillar 1 in Inspire builds on that. It's bottom up. What do we need in our individual institutes? But 2 and 3 really provide that opportunity to, quote, act in the national interest. How do we work across institutes in Pillar 2 to create this infrastructure that allows everyone do good work, right? And I think the metric of success there is how many people, how many different groups are using those infrastructures, right? And pillar 3 goes a step further. I see that as the top-down. What can we do at a national level in the strategic interest to create infrastructure that genuinely benefits all? And I just want to give an example of what I think is a remarkable infrastructure in that context. It's one from our nearest neighbour, the UK. It's called UK Biobank. It's been in the news a lot recently. But I think it's one of the best examples of data infrastructure in the world today. It was an investment of 200 million. 500,000 people participated in the study. Something like 16,000 papers have been produced from accessing that data resource by scientists in 60 different countries. It was completely selfless creation of data infrastructure and data for the research community. If you look at the 5 pillars that you mentioned, William, you know, training, I don't know how many PhD students have been trained from UK Biobank, but it's a lot. Performance, 16,000 papers, many countless papers in Nature, in Cell, in Nature Genetics. Industry, over 200 million pounds in co-investment from industry to create data sets that the research community as a whole can use. Innovation, they've generated many signatures of disease predisposition before symptoms can present that have led to lots of different products, and indeed a follow-up study called Our Future Health, where 8% of the entire UK population has been recruited. And in the international context, the study has been a magnet to bring scientists into the UK. I'm not suggesting we do the same thing by any means. I'm just saying that is a remarkable example of what we should be trying to build, the mentality of creating resources that others can use. Okay, so I think that's about it from me. Like, in summary, I'm really looking forward to pillars 2 and 3 and what we can do working together as a community to really make the best for Ireland and for research in Ireland.
Thank you, Jumper. There's some themes there I know we're going to return to in the questions. I'm going to pass over to Carmel. Over to you.
I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of our Provost. Sends her apologies. Dr. Linda Doyle was unable to be here, but I suppose in some ways, from my own background, and I'm following JP's example, I come from a school of education, which would be a social science background, but specifically arts in education. So I'm covering that domain, and it's a great privilege to be the Dean of the faculty, which is a very broad in Trinity specifically, but equally we have a Dean's Forum now across all the universities in Ireland, representing very broad and diverse interests. And I was taken by, William, your comment there just around the notion of the top-down and the bottom-up. And that brings me in mind, in some ways, to this notion of balance. And we really warmly welcome this scheme. In fact, when I saw the word inspire, it almost motivates me to create something. But it does bring us to the heart, I suppose, of the balance piece. This idea around the language of research is something of interest, and it's something that we don't often unpack. And when you look at that, we're wondering, who's the audience? Like, who are we talking to when we're talking about research? How do we communicate? How do we engage? How do we connect with our audience in different ways? And I was at quite a number of events over the last 2 years in this role, and the language tends to be biased one direction. And I'm really excited about the Inspire opportunities, because I think the work that Research Ireland have done has rebalanced it. Absolutely. We're very, very excited and very welcoming of that initiative. The next step is for us is to put some skin on that, because as recently we were at an event where we were, I suppose, exploring the notion of science covering all aspects of what we do. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, arts could do the same. And in a way, I've always adopted, I suppose, almost an Enlightenment concept, which is the art, the craft, and the science of all knowledge forms. And I really feel that is central to the opportunities here in the infrastructure. So when we explore, I suppose, the notion around the language, it brings us then into definitions of infrastructure. And we were extremely excited, again, and this is representing conversation throughout our sister universities and the technological universities, The definitions of infrastructure, quite often coming out of the Draghi report, have been oriented towards competitiveness, innovation, technology, economic benefit. And I suppose what I'm seeing in this scheme, which I think is extremely welcome, is a much broader definition of infrastructure, and a wonderful opportunity for all of our areas, arts, humanities, social sciences, across the, you talked about biobank as a form of infrastructure. For us, you may have archives, other forms of tech, other forms of data systems, and I see all of those as being very, very warmly welcomed. When I look particularly at the European systems, we're very taken with the European Strategy Forum roadmap in 26. I think that offers a huge opportunity for us. Also, a lot of the and we have the one in England, like the mapping where they've done the arts and humanities. We also have DARIA, we have CESTA, the European Open Science Cloud as well. That offers that balance that I suppose will cover the art, the craft, and the science of knowledge and of content. I'm conscious of time. I suppose the final thing, which is really relevant, is coming back to William. Your speech really inspired me in some ways, so pardon the pun. The idea of complementing existing models, and that's what I see as very, very welcome across the full range of expertise. The challenge is going to be around, there's no doubting the work the Research Ireland have done, in fairness, in terms of levelling the playing pitch. There's no doubting that. The Inspire framework and the infrastructure support is there. In some ways, there'll be a tension as to which model of competitiveness, whether it's the broader model, is actually the one that's rolled out and implemented, or a more narrow one. And that, unfortunately, I think, wouldn't support foundational research. That bottom up, which I think you spoke really, that's a tension for us also in Ireland across the sector. But it's also a challenge for us to try and address and how we take that forward. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you so much. Let's keep moving on. Dermot, I'm particularly interested in your take on the kind of European context and the role of Inspire within that kind of ecosystem of connectivity.
Yeah, I'll cover that as I make some notes. Thank you, Kate. I mean, I just wanted to start with the kind of word that William was using a lot in the speech, was around system, you know, and I think that's something from a Research Ireland perspective we've been quite focused on also in terms of the new strategy that we put out and how we're kind of viewing the world, which is that for Ireland to really be competitive and for us to kind of really leverage the investment that's going in, we need a high-performing system, not just high-performing individual academic groups or high-performing centres, but it all has to connect together in a way that has internationally competitive universities connecting with industry, civic society, and allowing us to think about it in a holistic way. And to some extent, that word of system also refers to infrastructure, because in infrastructure, you've got a kind of a hardware and a software piece, or in this case, it's about the physical infrastructure and the people that you need to operate that structure, to run it, the programmatic activity that needs to run on it. And I think this is the really big challenge that we have with Inspire, is to make the right decisions about how we invest in that physical infrastructure and to make sure we have that physical infrastructure connected correctly to the right programmatic structures, you know, so that we have the PhDs coming in, the large-scale research centres, the individual PI groups that can connect across a national piece of infrastructure, as just been talked about. And what I'm really optimistic about with Inspire is that we've found ways to by Research Ireland working in partnership with the HEA to hopefully begin to align infrastructure investment with a programmatic investment, because most of our funding is programmatic in nature. And I think that's a real important step forward with Inspire. Actually, I think above and beyond where PRTLI was, which will allow it to, I think, provide much greater impact and benefit over time. So I just wanted to reflect on that systems piece for a second. In terms of Europe, look, I mean, I think Europe is a really interesting opportunity, but also, if we're honest about it, challenge. I mean, Inspire by itself will not solve our challenge about how we connect with infrastructure in Europe. So, I mean, Europe looks at this through two particular lenses, these kind of single-site facilities and then their distributed facilities. And the single-site facilities often don't work from our perspective because the scale of investment and the scale of activity that's needed to make it work is something that often doesn't work from a small country. That's not just an Irish thing. It's a thing you see around Europe as a whole. Distributed models work very, very well for us, and they actually connect our infrastructure in with international infrastructure, but also they connect our researchers in with international researchers and build those collaboration networks that are really important, not just with other academic institutions, but also with industry. I think that's probably where we need to put our focus, is to understand how the Inspire investment can build assets here that connect to those distributed networks around Europe. And we've seen that through some of the activity already on the ground. I know we're leading on the marine side at the moment, and we're involved in about 15 other kind of distributed networks. So we'd like to see that grow. So I think that's the real opportunity. But of course, as you mentioned, William, you know, they're building a new roadmap for Europe, the kind of S3 roadmap for the next 5 years. I mean, that probably needs to be thought about in a way that's even more comprehensive from Inspire. I think that's a cross-government department understanding about how all of those elements connect across health and agriculture and energy into the universities and into the kind of Inspire agenda. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity in Europe, and I think Inspire is going to create a different platform from which we can connect to the European opportunity. But I also think we probably need to think even beyond that, you know, as to how we're going to set ourselves up to really begin to think about how we can connect in a kind of sustainable and systematic way into some of these larger European infrastructure pieces. If I can just make one or two quick other comments before I finish. I mean, the other piece that I just wanted to pick up, William also mentioned two other pieces that are just worth re-emphasizing. The first was around talent, and I think it's really, really important we think about infrastructure as a connective activity to our research, to allow us to attract talent, to allow us to retain talent, to think about how we will train our talent very differently with access to infrastructure. And of course, we really need to think very clearly about the issue about how we bring in a different kind of talent to operate and manage and support that infrastructure so that it's there long-term in a way that's going to work for the system. And I know from my own experience when I was running CRAN and we had a very large, significant microscopy infrastructure, actually running these infrastructures in ways that make them open to other research communities and open to industry are very easy to state in this kind of stage, very difficult to manage and implement in practice. And it does take a kind of cultural mindset for those operating the infrastructure to be proactive and engaging with the rest of the community and to use this infrastructure as a bridge. It also takes a real challenge to make sure that the research community write in the access charges to that infrastructure, and then more importantly, actually use them to access the infrastructure. Because often you get those access charges built in, but then they get used for other things that come up over the course, because the whole sustainability model is based on this kind of transparent and honest understanding about how a whole community is going to do it. Because if we can't get that right, the irony is those institutions who put their hand up to host infrastructure are going to bear the cost and the headache of that, versus it being an asset and a benefit for the institution. It becomes an overhead. And I think we really need to have a mature conversation about that piece, you know, how we connect it to talent and how we connect it to sustainability. And I'll just finish by saying that's really also important how we think about how we connect with industry, because for industry to want to use this infrastructure, we have to think about things like ISO certification or GovLab practice use, so that the data that comes out of the infrastructure use can also be used by industry as part of their formal research and formal programs, which often is not how universities operate for many good reasons. And so there's challenges there for us to reflect upon too. But all of these are challenged from an incredibly interesting platform and opportunity, which is Inspire. And what I think they'll do, to go back and finish, is they will help us to mature our system to understand how we move from being institutions or groups that run pieces of kit to institutions and groups that run infrastructure, which is available for use for national good.
Great, thank you so much. And then particularly a warm welcome to our international speaker joining the panel here today. Antje, I wonder if you had a response to what you heard so far?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I skipped actually what I had prepared here. Because first of all, big thank you. It's a huge honor to be here during such an important year for Ireland and your research ecosystem and the research infrastructures here in Ireland. Second, I think there are many answers to your questions already out there, because Europe has come a long way in the past 25 years. Since S3 started, European research infrastructures have been developed. I myself had the possibility to be there for 17 years already. I also had the honor to chair the ERIC Forum, where 32 ERICs are coming together to speak with one voice. And I can tell you there's a huge, deep ecosystem waiting for Ireland to take advantage of this. And a lot of questions that you just highlighted when we think about how to work with industry. We have been discussing this for years, and we are starting now to come to the point where we develop solutions. For example, the term business developer was not a term that you wanted to use in a discussion with academic research infrastructures. Now it's normal that people start hiring business developers to teach the staff, the technical staff, and how do I onboard manufacturers for having collaborations when we are setting up the infrastructure? How do I find small and medium enterprises to take advantage of the services that I can offer? So that's taking place. Another topic that was mentioned here, European Open Science Cloud. Well, it's a bit abstract right now, but it's there, it exists. But what it really means is we have to train our students from day one. We have to train the users of our research infrastructures from day one to take advantage of the workflows, of the fair data, of the repositories that are out there. But that also means coordination, bringing people together, train them, provide training material, and do not reinvent the wheel. Inspire is actually a unique opportunity when it comes to the investment into instruments in this phase 1. But what I heard before, when we have phase 2 and phase 3, to also put some funding into the coordination, into the communication at the national level. That across the institutes, across the universities, the people who will be running the instruments, the people who will take the decisions, have the opportunity to come nationally together regularly to exchange on how do you provide access, what's the access management, how do we raise together awareness, what's happening in Cork, what's happening in Dublin, so that everyone knows which services are in Ireland, and then you can take, based on an informed strategy, decisions which European infrastructure do we join first, second, third. You don't have to join all 32 ERICs all at once. I would go ahead with the national strengths based on Inspire, based on also probing the system, bringing together the community. So it really starts bottom up with the people who are operating the cutting edge instruments, but then top down by providing this, I call it icing on the cake layer. It's nothing when it comes to the funding, actually. It's maybe 5%, if even, of the investment that you're putting out there right now. And that would make a huge difference that we have seen really in many other countries happening before they were joining successfully infrastructures. It's not the big ones that have the advantage, it's the ones that take the decision to, okay, let's get coordinated.
Thank you so much. William, I don't know if there's anything you immediately want to respond to from there. If not, I can move on to some of the other questions we've...
No, I must say I was very taken with what Carmel said about language, and I know, speaking from the department perspective, like there's a particular phraseology, obviously, that plays out in a major way in government, very much tied to that competitiveness, productivity. And of course, when you bring it into the system, sometimes it can be sometimes discordant. And, there can be often, or at least sometimes, a situation where we're kind of appear to be speaking different languages when we're not really. I think it's something we can focus on because, we're not going to, the idea of that system, the system doesn't work if we're, if we don't understand what each of us are saying. I was very taken, Anja, by what you said about we have all these questions. You're saying the answers are there. So it's just a question then of how we connect into that and sort of have, just as you said, the coordinating mechanisms that in a systematic way we're working through the opportunities on the basis of there's a lot of knowledge, understanding and expertise out there. So I suppose those are the two things. Maybe.
And I could start there as well, because we also had 4 questions from previously submitted before this event, which were about the national appetite for joining the ERIC system. So I just wondered if anybody had a response to that. So, how best can we align our core technologies, and how can we evidence a need to join an ERIC? Is it a national kind of intention for us to join a broad number of these organizations? I just wonder if there's any comments from that. Maybe, Dermot, starting with you.
I think we should be thinking about joining. There's no question that we need to understand that as a small country, we can't invest in infrastructure at the scale we're going to need in isolation. And so finding ways to connect with broader infrastructure agenda clearly makes a lot of sense for us as a country. I mean, I think the challenge here is we need to understand as we invest in infrastructure to join, we also need to invest in the people and the travel and the coordination to leverage the opportunities that come with that. So membership can't be seen as a kind of a flat engagement. It's the starting point for a multifaceted engagement. And I think that's something we do need to think about, is that, you know, from a constrained budgetary environment, if we're going to commit to these activities, we need to make sure we commit to make the participation a success as opposed to just to be a member, you know. And I think that requires slightly more holistic understanding about the costs involved and the responsibilities involved in those who are going to be leading that agenda.
Yeah, very interesting. And I suspect also that maybe in a world where we've got past the honeymoon stage, I guess, of the CERN partnership, there are some learnings from that as well, which we could feed back into the conversation. We're really interested for another day. One of the other themes that came up really strongly in the pre-submitted questions was around the tension, if there is a tension, between data and tech sovereignty and security and the open science agenda more broadly. I wonder if I could start maybe with you, JP, what your take is from your discipline and what you think some of the key drivers are there, and how we can help support the research community to balance those.
Yeah, I think the key thing there with health data is a really strong and ongoing relationship with the community of people who are participating in your study. So, you know, the term we use now is patient and public involvement. So really bringing the participant voice into how you're designing your study and how you're making your data available, so that, you know, it is truly a joint journey. It's not a case of scientists collecting data and sharing it as they see fit. It's more, you know, what's the relationship with the participants? How do they want the data shared? Are they comfortable with it? And then doing it in a very open and transparent way.
Anybody else got any views that you'd like to, Carmel? I'm interested from the arts and humanities perspective, actually, on this question.
Yeah, no, I mean, my perspective, it was genuine around the balance. I really see huge opportunities in this Inspire scheme, absolutely, and in the whole landscape as it's moving forwards. We've had probably in Ireland possibly a narrower perspective, because the ERICs and some of the consortia, you know, have been much broader in terms of their understanding in Europe, probably for the last 15, 20 years, than we've operationalized here. And it was interesting, I think it was John or somebody said there was like one person in the department, you know, in that area. It's understandable. We're kind of getting that maturity that you talked about to bring us forwards into that space now. But when we talk in the AHSS side of the house, and I don't want to speak just for that, but we would see, you know, the things that you're talking about, ethics and policy, as being absolutely core connected into these understandings of how we safeguard data and how we report on those you know, findings, etc., and how we do that. What has happened up to now, in some ways, I feel, is just the competitiveness language. You know, we were evolving economy. I grew up, I won't say when, but it wasn't in the 70s. I started in the 60s, but anyway, and like that really pushed us forwards, you know. So I understand how we've arrived, but the opportunities, and that's why actually, in fairness to all involved, the word inspire is inspiring. The opportunities are there now for that full understanding of how all components of knowledge come together to create, you know, the whole understanding. So we see in a lot of these ERICs, when I've spoken to our colleagues in AHSS communities, huge potential, particularly in Derry and those, like they're very strong.
Yeah.
So we are talking a lot about competitiveness, of course, for Ireland, for Europe, and what does that really mean? When we're working in the academic sector and the publicly funded research sector, we really have to make up our mind today how we want to prepare ourselves, for example, for industry that is in desperate need of AI-ready, high-quality data. It's not that we don't want this, but it also needs a workflow that has to be put in place carefully. It starts with Pillar 1 in Inspire, that you have the cutting-edge instruments of today to start acquiring high-quality data. But then, of course, you need data management plan in place. You need data stewardship in place. You need public data repositories that might be open when it's non-sensitive data, that might be protective when it's sensitive data, but with a legislation around it that still enables research teams from Ireland, from Europe, to work on this together. So I would really like to encourage, maybe also as a question to the other panelists, how can we complement what's now starting with Inspire to put these other components in place that at the end you have AI-ready research data available to your researchers as well as for industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'm often puzzled by this. You know, you asked the question, and it's a really good question. I mean, we talk about the need for a system, and the data infrastructure issue as you get into the agenda from the department's perspective. And I suppose it was sort of motivated by all the work we were doing on the HPC, the AI factory antenna, looking at the gigafactory, and then the penny drops. Well, you have all this compute power. Where's the data? And what are we doing in terms of stewardship of the data as a system? And then the sort of involvements that you have where you come across groups, and Jean-Pierre was one person that came to talk to us with colleagues, where clearly people are very focused on, it was the elixir. That's an area, isn't
yes.
it?
Yeah,
and you're sort of seeing that people are on their own initiative in the system because they see the need in terms of their own research and the research system's broader requirements, engaging in trying to get us to up our game. But it looks very ad hoc. Now, I mean, you might say, well, why doesn't the department get its act together and sort all this out? But it is a sort of how do the higher education research institutions as a whole come together to help, the department, help Research Ireland, help the HEA, help us in our discussions with central government to make the case that this is really critical? Because, I mean, I don't know, people more expert than me will give an answer to this question. Where is the Irish research system in 5 years' time if we haven't got the compute power and we don't have the data infrastructure? We're going through a process of developing a life sciences strategy. So many elements of that are crucially dependent on having that kind of capability. But there's a lot goes on. We're all busy. But where are we going to find time as a system to actually engage with that issue, in the way that you do, with a strategic approach, a plan, funding, the people requirement, all of that. So that's my question back.
And just building on that, this is from the health data perspective, how the investment in Inspire on the infrastructure you're referring to connects with Department of Health and what they're planning for the European health data space. Yeah. In a way that we remove redundancy, increase impact, and so on. And I suppose the point there is to create that ecosystem. I remember, Jeremy, at the RIN launch, you had a message behind you about creating a national research ecosystem. How we do that cross-departmentally as well, because otherwise, obviously, the risk is you get investment in one department that's not connected with what's happening in another.
No, I mean, you're very right to gently point that out, because I talk about the system, but I mean, the system comes back to our side of the fence, and we work closely in implementation 2030 with Department of Health, with DETI, with Department of Communications, Climate Action. But obviously, we need to kind of be better aligned and coordinated, and particularly in the health data issue,
Yes. Final comment. Just around the connectivity piece, that's an absolute given around our connectiveness in Europe. I think the starting point, this Inspire, motivates us locally in some ways to connect ourselves in the sense that, I think I was asked specifically, Kate, just around the AHSS perspective. We don't see AHS, I suppose, as peripheral to competitiveness in some ways. AHSS shapes the conditions under which competitiveness is actually possible. And, you look, I mentioned there about, AI will come in terms of ethics, law, social acceptance, behaviour change, all of these matters, media studies, political science. Most institutions, higher institutions also, themselves are objects of social scientific study. I'm really excited, genuinely, about the opportunities that Inspire. It's actually, there are minor comments in some quarters at the moment. What do we call it? Chatter, where people are a little bit, pulling in different directions. We're going to have to come together, and this is the forum in which to do it, to pull us together, to align us. One of the initiatives that we're doing in Trinity at the moment, and a colleague of mine is here from TRIS, which is our Trinity Research Institute for Social Sciences, Professor Raj Chari, I see him there in the audience. But that hit us like a ton of bricks. Do we know? So when industry partners were coming, when I took on this role, I spoke to Raj about this, and I said, okay, so we have Apple coming in, or whoever is coming in, and they're interested in the full range of human experience, of what knowledge is. How am I going to systematically present, rather than Carmel actually knowing all the people and ringing who's doing work on this, that, and the other? So our colleague in TRIS and Mike McRae, who developed the system with Raj, have created a fabulous app that now I can type in and I can locate across the faculty. And it's phenomenal to see the people that are engaging at different levels. We're hoping to roll that out more broadly, etc. But the connectivity piece operates, because I'm not sure with yourself, William, you said the top down, the bottom up. Like, we have a small bit of work to do here. The leadership, I think, is key from Research Ireland, genuinely, and the Inspire framework is enormous. Infrastructure can be a microscope. It can also be, a piece of musical text or literature, etc. And there's space now for all of those to come together in a comprehensive way to address, all of these matters, so that they're not sidelined off. I'll give you the final example. I was walking up here and felt, oh goodness, a bit of a bump under my foot, which in medical terms may be a start of a corn. And I kind of thought the medical side would tell me to do this. The art side would tell me the shoe is the wrong shape. It's the craft is I've got to do something about it. So it's that full package, really, that I'm genuinely excited about where we go forwards. We probably have a small bit more conversations locally to be done just to get that tightened up, but the systems will have to follow then, yeah.
I think that's a brilliant place to stop and move to questions from the floor. So now's your opportunity. I'd like to see some hands, or I'm going to point at somebody that I know. That was the person I was going to point to if no one put their hand up.
Oh my goodness.
So this is Liam Gallagher, submitted one of the pre-questions. Over to you.
Looking online as well.
Great, thank you. We'll take one if there is online.
Yeah, planned question, Kate, but no, I think it's fantastic. I think it's great to have this event, because one of the things I'm passionate about is kind of breaking down that interinstitutional kind of barriers that seem to be there, and back to the systems. Like the Inspire initiative provides a very significant opportunity to say, okay, from a kind of bottom-up manner from the institutions, what's required at an infrastructural level. The key test is really to take that information and create a kind of nationwide plan for infrastructure, because that's what's missing. I don't see that, apart from maybe specific areas. And I think we have to also allow those areas, those initiatives, like from the genomic side, to appear from the bottom up as well. So it's not, while we're trying to create a nationwide plan, we have to allow for serendipity and opportunities as well, because it kind of often they start that way. It's contacts that happen at the European level, there's opportunities. And I think one of the challenges that we have is timeliness, where there's an opportunity required to participate at a European level. Who do you go to? What's the engagement? What's the pathway for providing an opportunity for Ireland to be at a foothold? So I suppose from an opportunity level, Inspire really provides a big opportunity to kind of almost like a census of what's required. The next stage then is to develop a national plan that kind of, respects different institutions, but the focus is really the national plan for making an effective system for individual researchers, doesn't matter what institute they're from, is able to carry out their research, so either academia or industry. So I don't know if that's in the kind of plan for Inspire. I think one of the challenges I feel is if it's not really clear what the level of interinstitutionality is for Inspire. Is it encouraged? And I know in principle for advanced infrastructure, it's kind of encouraged. But I hope it's really actively encouraged. I hope it's not just about I'm the lead institution for a particular bid. Really actively encourage interinstitutional collaboration. That, to me, is a critical part. If it's not actively encouraged, and if it's always about the lead institution, we need to break down that kind of concept.
Yeah, I mean, William, there's
Liam Gallagher, University College Dublin.
Okay.
William and then Dermot, yeah.
Yeah, so there's some things that I can be clear about and some things less clear about when I answer questions. I can be very clear that if that shared national approach isn't reflected in Pillar 2, it's just not meeting the requirement. This is the start, and I mean, it's great that we can have this conversation about very substantial investment in an area that's really badly needed and for all the reasons we've discussed can be critical in driving forward the successful research and innovation system. But we're at an early stage, and unless we work it exactly in the way that you're describing it, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, like we're orbiting and we're not landing. So the concept of a roadmap has to be central. A national roadmap needs to be central to what we do, but that requires a mindset change, everywhere across the system to kind of, adopt that cohesive approach that we required, and the difficult, we're talking about the 750 million or whatever amount is spent this year, and it's great money's on the way, but money will land and people would be disappointed because they wouldn't have made it or they didn't get the scale of investment that it would have looked like. So this is the easy part of it. But the point you make and the kind of trajectory or pathway you point to is exactly the way it needs to move forward. And it's inherent in our approach.
Thanks. And Dermot?
Yeah, in many ways I'm just echoing that, but maybe even to state it more strongly. I mean, obviously the way it's been structured, we're going to get, through the first round call, get a kind of expression of interest around what people are looking for across the system. And the idea is that will be shared broadly, and there will be a chance for alignment to be built across all of the interesting infrastructure requirements that people have. But just to be clear, I mean, I certainly can't stand over any recommendation to fund multiple instruments of the same kind in multiple institutions, so that simply won't be the agenda. And the second thing is that the sustainability plans of infrastructure will simply require that there's a critical mass of users that can make sure that the infrastructure is going to be sustainable. So those two factors by themselves require a very clear understanding about how the infrastructure will map out, not just at an institutional level, but across the country. And if I was sitting in an institution and I was saying I was going to take the responsibility to house this infrastructure, I would be actually asking and demanding those other questions are answered too, because otherwise, as I say, you move from having an asset to having a cost, and no institution wants to have that situation. Can I just say, in terms of Europe, I mean, Mike Ryan's here, who's our kind of connection into Europe and the infrastructure, and I think if there is ambition around that that's coming from within the system, then we do have pathways to connect into that. We've got the conference in September in Cork, which is bringing that infrastructure here as part of the presidency, that community here. So we have the connections and the relationships into that. And people can begin to send out what that can look like in time. And I should say, Teresa's here is also going to be doing that first job we talked about, which is building that kind of landscape. So that is all built in.
Thank you. Let's take another question in the centre there. Thank you. If you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Hi, how are you? My name is Kerry Thompson and I'm from the University of Galway. So you've spoken a little bit today about building and investing in the talent pipeline. This is really kind of centred around doctoral students and candidates. I'm just wondering, could you comment, quite a few of you have mentioned technical specialists and infrastructure experts. How are we going to help build out the pipeline to build, support these infrastructures and these people who are going to be using these technologies? Anyone who will take it.
Dermot, yeah.
I can answer that. I think that's a really good question. It's a really good question. I mean, this is one of the challenges that I think we have to think about at a system level. So, I mean, historically, those people were trained through the TUs. I presume that's still happening, that the kind of technical training is coming through there. That needs to be coupled with specialist training then on specific tools and specific instrumentation. That comes back to people having certainty over career planning. And I think that's going to have to be something we look at really deeply as we think about infrastructure going in that's going to need a 5-10 year sustainability plan, and we're going to have people who can operate those tools for that period. So I think that's all part of it. And then the other piece, of course, is that actually a lot of the operators for some of these tools will be trained PhDs, but who will be moving to a different career path, not moving from a research trajectory, but running to a specialist tool support person, which are absolutely essential because the efficiency of training everyone to use every tool individually just doesn't work. So actually what we need are a handful of really deep specialists who support people accessing tools and accessing infrastructure. So I think there are some institutions that have done that well. I mean, Tyndall is an obvious example who operates their infrastructure very much through that model. I'm sure there's others around the system, but it's not also the norm right now, so it will require a kind of changing of mindset at an institutional level to plan around what these kind of large-scale infrastructures look like and how they can be sustained. And it's a great question, and maybe it's not getting enough attention, but it certainly will get attention as we go through this process.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a question from the online audience.
There is 2 questions online. Maybe I can say.
Let's go with the first one.
Yeah, the first one is from Eamon Hennessy. He's wondering about dual-use technology, and given its prominency in the next MFF, he's wondering, would it be an opportunity for the INSPIRE programme to support proposals which support national resilience and defence? And then he says it could be areas as cybersecurity or maritime space, but also social science areas, so societal resilience and ethics with respect to adoption of emerging technologies.
Yeah, maybe I'll look to William first, comment on the dual-use question.
So I suppose, our kind of approach to this was through the lens initially of the FP10 negotiations, and it's dual use by default. And it, clearly can be a sensitive issue here in Ireland. But by the same token, as you kind of explore it, you understand that, I don't want to be at all minimise the concerns that are there. There's a bit of a red herring quality. Dual use, inherent in new technologies, they have positive or adverse consequences. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, there's not some restriction on the infrastructure that'll be informed by some kind of dual use or by some sort of security or resilience kind of element from the point of view of the from the point of view of the department, or indeed Research Ireland, the HEA, who are running the call. But the other dimension of the question was sort of.
He was saying, will it be support for national resilience and defence? And he was just pointing out that it would be from the social sciences also.
Yeah. So I think it's clear, and it's in the FP10 framework, and it's very much evident in the national approach across a whole range of policy areas. There's a huge focus on national security, the resilience of our critical infrastructures. It's an area where clearly the research and innovation system has a critical role to play. We've had some engagement with some of the IUA universities, learning a lot about some really interesting work that's been done there. Fundamentally, it's a question that it plays to that issue. Fundamentally, it's an issue for the Department of Defence in the context of their sort of strategic approach to identify national requirements, to sort of again allow us to engage more directly. But I know, Kate, from speaking to you previously, it's an issue that the system itself is very focused on, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more dialogue and discussion and kind of establishment of models to kind of engage with both nationally, but particularly with the increased investment under FP10 to ensure consistent with broader national policy requirements that we participate. Actually, an important dimension of that, which I'll just mention in passing, which was part of the research security guidelines, was the whole issue of security vetting, because we can have the discussion in abstract, but unless we have a capacity for people to be vetted to participate in calls, we're outside.
I'm delighted to hear that. I'm getting the nod that we're out of time. I know there are loads more questions. I know there's one online, and I can see a few hands in the audience as well, but I'm afraid we're going to have to call it there. I think it's testament to how the kind of engagement of the sector and the leadership teams that we've had this fantastic dialogue today. Could you join me in thanking everybody from the panel? And I'm going to hand over to Paul to wrap up.
Thank you very much, Kate, and thank you to all our participants. In my old job, when I was an ambassador, I would often share sort of lunch or dinner discussions on sometimes quite specialised topics. And I was almost inevitably the least expert person in the room, and that usually included the waiting staff. And I used to, at the end of this dinner discussion, take refuge in saying, I'm not going to try and sum up what has been a very rich discussion, so I will recycle that line today, only because I think everyone here has understood the great opportunity. There are elements of complexity, but there are a great opportunity in what we're doing. We're very lucky, I think, to be in a country, and a number of people alluded to this earlier, a country where science and knowledge and the disinterested pursuit of the truth is not contested political space and is not contested economic space. And I think, having lived in various countries around the world where that's not always been true, I think we should just take a moment to reflect on the fact that it's easy to give out about aspects of schemes and aspects of change. And I think there are some in the academic community who are perhaps more open to change than others, as there is in any community. But I think there's a real opportunity here to use what is scarce resources and important investment and a system-led opportunity nationally and a collaborative approach internationally to really make a big difference. And I think if in 10, 15 years' time we have breakthroughs in innovation, in public policy, in fundamental knowledge and in applied understanding, we can look back at events like today, at the Inspire programme and at the development of it and related work, and think we made a real difference. So I want to thank the Minister for his leadership. I want to thank William as his representative on Earth this morning. I want to thank Jonathan Halloran for coming up from Cork, for all our panellists, and for Kate for moderating them so well. For all of you online and here in the Conrad Hotel, it's been a hot topic on a hot day. I hope the rest of the day passes well. I'm going to leave you with a quote from Einstein about research. He said, "If we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research." Discuss. I think in a paradoxical way, we do know what we're doing. In a good way, we know what we're doing, and we don't know what we're doing at the same time, which is probably the essentials of a really good approach to research. So good luck to everyone who's engaged in the Irish EU presidency. I'm sure it will be a tremendous success. Very exciting news about the Coreper agreement to FP10, and I hope today's discussion and what leads from it will help shape a really inspired and inspiring approach to this topic in the months and years ahead. Thank you so much for coming today.